Welcome to another episode of Exploring Possibilities, available on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, and of course, journeyofpossibilities.com. And week after week, I am having what I consider to be some of the most interesting conversations on the planet about holistic spiritual living. Both the show and website are made possible by Mario Rosales of Tech Life Balance. I'm so grateful. Mario, I know there's a lot you can do to help listeners as well. Tell me about it.
Thank you, Cheryl. I actually want to say, first off, I don't speak geek. I speak English, Lightworker, Galactic, Spanish, or you name it, I can probably work it or figure it out, even sign language maybe. Anyway, the truth of the matter is I can make it understandable for you. Technology seems to be very complicated for a lot of people, and I've been in it for a long time, and I can make it understandable. I don't try to sell you stuff that you don't need, because that's not me. What I am the type of person that can give you the truth. The things that you don't need, we can say, no, we don't need that. Or I even have a listener one time that called me and we agreed that she wasn't ready for my services. So what can I help you with? I can help you with websites, blogs, video, podcasts, social media. And yeah, even that weird stuff, go ahead and give me a call and we can figure it out. Contact me at marrosales.net and I look forward to talking to you.
Who are you? Why are you here? What wonders and opportunities await you beyond physical death? What happened millennia ago to create the damaged earth and fractured societies you see around you? Empowering, enlightening, internationally acclaimed, the Joseph Communications books offer answers to these questions. Spiritual, concise, contemporary, non-denominational, the communications originate from Joseph, a highly evolved discarnate spirit concerned for you and the future of the planet and its peoples. The words of Joseph and his soul group give you the power to bring light and change into your own life and the lives of others and to restore the earth. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats, the communications can be ordered today at www.thejosephcommunications.com and also from Amazon and other major booksellers. All proceeds are used for further publishing and advertising and to make the communications available worldwide.
Today's guest is Interspecies communicator Tamar Peters, founder of My Avatar Adventure. Tamar is an Advent animal activist focusing on the plight of endangered wildlife species. Through her own incredible journey of discovery and studying animal communication, she now shares her wisdom and experience to help us reconnect with nature. You can find out more about her online at myavataradventure.com. Welcome, Tamar.
Thank you very much, Cheryl.
I am so glad you took the time to be with us. And you're in Spain, right?
Yes. I'm in the wonderful, glorious beachside of sunny Spain.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, but you're also having some heat right now. I think we just talked about. So my sympathies as we come to these sweltering coastal times, right?
Absolutely. I think that the whole of Europe's having a bit of a heat wave at the moment. So we're hoping for some rain soon, just so that it can cool down the planet a little bit for all of us.
Yes, I think we're all due for that. Well, I'm dying to ask more about your story because I actually had my own telepathic experience with animals in the jungles of Peru. And that kind of really awakened me to a deeper connection just with pets and wildlife around my house. You've had a big connection open up for you over the years, haven't you?
Yes, it kind of came out of the blue, and it was in a very unusual setting. So I really had to question it. So, over a number of years, I'd had a few very stressful years when I was living still in the UK at the time. And so when I moved to Spain, it was really for a sabbatical. And I remember sitting at a cafe near the beach on New Year's Day. And this was 2013. Yes, 2013. And I was celebrating the 1st of January, and I saw this wonderful golden retriever, white version of a golden retriever playing on the beach. Now, they're one of my favorite large dogs. Anyway, so I was watching and I thought, this is interesting. I can't see he belongs to anybody. Anyway, so I carried on watching him for a little bit, and then pretty much everybody left the beach, and he was still there. And I thought, well, I'm now getting worried that either his owners have left him behind, or maybe he's lost.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I went and called him, and he came over to me, and I could see he was really covered in sand, like more than he would normally be from just rolling in it. Anyway, so I got him some water, and I got him some bread, and I could tell straight away that he was very hungry. Anyway, he had a collar on with a name tag, and I looked at his name tag, and he was called Max. Anyway, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I think this dog is lost. There was a telephone number on the reverse side, so I asked the owner of the restaurant where I was sitting if he could give the telephone number a ring and just say that we have their dog Max. And as I'm sitting there waiting for the owners to arrive, I had this whole story synopsis go on inside my head. And Max was just sitting next to me, pretty much looking up at me and then lying down. And this whole little story created itself in my head. And I thought, okay, that's really interesting. I didn't pay too much attention to it until a lady arrived to actually pick up Max. And I asked them what the situation was with Max. And the story that she told me that had happened with him is exactly the story I had in my head. I mean, to such detail that I was a little bit shocked. And she must have seen the change in my face, because literally I was going paler and paler and paler as she was talking. And so it transpired that basically she was not the owner. She was the manager of a little hotel, which was 2 towns down from us, where I was living. And the owners had gone away, and Max had been looked after by her and her husband. But unfortunately, he must have got bored or something and had disappeared for 2 days. And that, now he was ready to go home. And I got this very strong feeling from him. He was a little bit nervous, and I could feel that energy a little bit with him. Anyway, as she carried on with the story and then said, people had phoned and said that they'd seen him and they'd been trying to catch him for a few days. All these little details that she said is exactly what I had in my head. And so when she came to the end of the story, I just looked at her and I said, okay. And I said, I think he's a little bit nervous to come home because I think he thinks he's in trouble. And she said, no, obviously we've been very worried about him because, he's our responsibility. We'll look after him. Anyway, he then walked with her to the car. And as he got to the car, he turned around and he just looked at me. And I burst into tears. He got in the car and they drove away. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, it's not possible. It's just not possible. Maybe I'd had too many glasses of wine. Something had just profoundly happened to me in this experience, in that literally every single detail that the woman shared with me is what Max had shared with me. But more than that, so by this time now I'm starting to walk home, and I'm crying because I've got this sense of amazement, surprise, shock, made me a little bit scared. But more than anything, I had these memories flood back to me from my childhood of when we always had dogs in our home, pretty much up to 6 or 7 dogs at one time, because my mum absolutely loved dogs, and so did my sister and I. And I used to take them for walks, and used to go down to my fort that I built next to the river near our house, and I used to sit and chat to them all day. And I hadn't had that memory for many, many, many years, and it just came flooding back to me that it was very normal for me when I was younger to talk to animals and to hear them. I would talk verbally to them, but I could hear, and when I say hear, sometimes it was words. Most of the time it was pictures or this kind of sense of just knowing. It just completely blew me away. And I remember coming back to my house and sitting in meditation, crying my heart out, going, I just don't understand what just happened. Why has this happened? Why has this happened now? Now, I've always had a natural affinity with animals and certainly with nature. And previous to this particular incident, I had a real reawakening to nature itself. I started to see flowers and see the trees and, feel the sea and everything in a much more profound way for at least about 6 months before this incident happened. Mm-hmm. So I was very kind of in a heightened, I would say, sensitivity. However, I had not had any kind of experience like this. And so I then got onto the internet and started researching communicating with animals.
Yeah, I bet you did.
This whole world opened up. I was so taken back by it that, I wasn't mad. What I had experienced wasn't that unusual. That, so many thousands of other people had also had similar experiences. And so, of course, that started my whole journey on this whole interspecies communication or animal communication, because I was just then fascinated, and all my memories and my understanding and my childlike imagination started coming back, which I thought was really lovely.
Isn't that fun? I love that. You're right. You're not alone. And I think the timing is interesting because you said this was 2013.
Yes.
So many of us had our senses heightened, had everything awakened more following the quote unquote 2012 shift. There was definitely a shift in awareness and consciousness, and that these gifts that you once knew you had were opening up to you again is so beautiful. But I can understand how that would have been a little bit scary, especially since it wasn't like you heard a voice talking to you that was the dog or whatever. It was just this sense of knowing that was then confirmed to you. And Absolutely. So that's really interesting. And then this led you into a completely new direction with your life overall in terms of connecting to wildlife, right?
Correct. And it was so interesting. I originally come from, I was born in Zimbabwe, but I was brought up in South Africa. So, we'd always, and because I worked in the events industry and hospitality, I had been, always involved in a lot of these wildlife reserves, game parks, and so on. And I think I'd become quite blasé about, those experiences because they were so often and so common for me as a South African. So what had happened was I'd left South Africa, by then about 15 years ago. And I just never imagined that I would reconnect with Africa in any way, shape, or form again. And so this was the interesting part, is when I started doing the animal communication training, and it was predominantly focused around pets, because they're easier to connect with, because they're more humanized than wild animals, for instance. So I did the training on it, and I thought, this is interesting. What does this have to do with anything in my life? Because at the time, my background was in event management. I was like, okay, so how does this link into, why am I suddenly, in Spain being diverted into animals? Right. And interesting, because, Spain is not known for good welfare for animal welfare. They're certainly a lot better than they used to be, but they're still very much struggling with, respecting and looking after animals. There's still the bullfighting that happens here. There's lots of other things that, I prefer not to talk about or focus on because they upset me too much. But, and they are starting to learn. Whereas, the UK is quite advanced as far as that is concerned. So again, I thought this is very strange. And I'm living in Spain. What am I meant to be doing with this? Mm-hmm. Anyway, it was over the next few months that I started to get some very powerful visions in my meditations and some phenomenal dreams that, one time I remember waking up at 3:00 in the morning in absolute despair, crying my heart out with the most incredible feeling of sorrow. And it was about wildlife, endangered wildlife species, and how many of them there were, and not just animals, but the plants too. And I'd been dreaming about it. And so I'd woken up with this dreadful sense of despair. And it kind of felt like I had the whole world's, sorrow around it. It wasn't just mine. And I found that incredibly overpowering. And so I thought, okay, I need to look into this a little bit more. So I could feel that I was being very specifically directed in my journey, and that it wasn't really about the pets, the cats and the dogs and so on. This was more about wildlife, and then it became endangered wildlife species, because I was kind of like, wildlife? Jeez, there are so many wild animals out there. What is it about all of them that I need to understand? And so it then became endangered wildlife species. And then I was visited by an enormous white lion who had a kind of V in his mane on his forehead, on the top of his head. He was very distinctive. And, I wasn't frightened by him, but I was certainly intimidated. And he kept showing up. And I'm like, okay. And that's when I got looking on the internet, researching white lions. Now, and again, I remembered that I'd actually been to Lion Park, just close to where I used to live in Johannesburg. And I'd seen white lions before, but I saw them as what they termed albino lions. And I thought they were very beautiful and very rare. For me, they just looked like, spiritual beings. I mean, they were quite stunning. Some of them had blue eyes, and others of them had gold eyes. And I remember driving around the park, having a look at them and thinking, wow, these are just so exceptional. So all of that came flooding back to me. I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I, looked up white lions, and that's when I found Linda Tucker at the Global White Lion Protection Trust, which is an organization, the only one that focuses on protecting the most endangered lion population, which is the white lions. And I basically said to her, look, I know this is going to sound really strange, and you're going to think I'm completely mad, but I had a dream, and this lion keeps coming to me. And she said, okay, describe the lion to me. So I did. She says, yes. She said, yep, that's pretty normal. You've been called. And I'm like, huh? What do you mean I've been called? And she said, yeah, his name's Mandla, and he's one of our lions here. He's actually the male king, they call him, of the royal pride that we have here in the reserve. And she says, you need to come. I said, what do you mean? She said, we have a facility here. And I was just like, oh, I'm not sure what to do with this. And then she said to me, what's your background? So I started talking to her about it. She went, yeah, we have a lot of people who organize events. They bring people from all over the world to come and spend time with the lions, because they run a leadership program. It's called White Lion Leadership. And I'm like, oh. And that's when all the pieces fell into place. Was like, wow, my background in events, and now the animals, and I could do something with this. I could combine the two. And of course, I love to travel. And so my world exploded literally overnight.
Once you got over the shock, right, of, I've been called by a lion. Okay, let's get busy.
Linda was amazing, because she, I related to her straight away. It was like reconnecting with an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time, but you've known all your life.
Yeah.
She was like a soul sister. And we just, chatted for a few hours. I mean, it was incredible. And that just set me off on my path that now I'm fulfilling. So, I was really astounded by the power of what was going on. But I was also, a little bit tentative, because it's a big responsibility when you're driven and motivated by something that's much greater than yourself, and that you may not fully and completely understand.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
that's really where we go into the faith, right? It's like, okay, if I'm being called to do this, then I have to trust that if I take the steps that I know, that the right people are going to come together and this thing's going to get bigger than me on its own as well, right?
yes, and it'll do it in its own divine timing.
Yes.
Unlike me controlling it or trying to, or pushing it or trying to.
Yeah.
It's been such a magnificent learning curve. One of the main things was I had to go there myself and have my own experience. And I have to tell you, I was about an hour outside of where the reserve is. It's it's in the Timbavati area near the Kruger National Park, which is the largest national park in South Africa. And this is their natural habitat. This is where actually most of the white lions are born naturally, and it's the only place on the planet. And it's interesting because the location of where they're born is on the ley line, which is directly up to Egypt and sits under the pyramid and the Sphinx.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And so there's this beautiful history behind the connection between Egypt, the Sphinx, and the white lions. And so I was to find that out later. Yeah, I was about an hour out of the reserve, and I could feel them. And they were going, she's here, she's here. It's about time. And I just burst into tears. I'm driving along. I couldn't see the road, probably I was crying so much. My heart chakra just swelled so hugely. I had to pull off because I was so emotional. I couldn't see where I was going. I was crying so much. And I just never thought I'd feel that way about going back to South Africa. And I was just reconnecting with the land, and I was reconnecting with the energy. And it was so palpable. It was incredible. So, yes, when I got to the gate, finally, the lady who came to pick me up said, "Good God gracious, are you okay?" I must have looked like a wreck. And I said, "I'll be fine, don't worry about it." Anyway, so I then spent 6 days there, just going on the observation trips to see the lions. And I tell you what, I spent 6 days in tears. I mean, all my stuff came up. All these emotions I didn't even know were there came up. The connection with them, and particularly one of the females, Nebu, and she was the daughter of the queen of the royal pride. She had a really profound effect on me. So whenever we were near her, I felt her energy the most. And what was magnificent is Linda was teaching us how to connect with them through telepathy, through the whole animal communication element of it. But in a very different way. I call it more communing than communicating, because, wildlife we don't have anything, honestly, as humans to offer wildlife. They have a lot of compassion for us. Some of the cheeky lions, have a very interesting view of us. And it's pretty much, they feel sorry for us, but they think we're quite stupid as a species. They have this kind of, "Oh, really? What are you here for? If only you would listen. If you want to learn how to save your species, you need to listen to the messages that we have to give." So some of them are really quite profound. And it's not like, when you do animal communication with pets, you can have a lot of two-way conversations. I find with wildlife, it's mostly one way. And that's us shutting up and listening to some very profound, wise, and sacred messages that they have for us. Now, the interesting thing is that the white lions, and actually any of the white versions of animals, so the white buffaloes that have been coming out, the white giraffes, white whales that have been showing up, the white bears, the white version of the brown bear, and the white stag that's shown up, they only arrive on the planet, they only start to arrive on the planet when the human species is in dire strait, when we are severely threatened as a species. They are here as sacred messengers for us. And in fact, there's a wonderful book called The White Animals. And it's about the white species that are starting to show up on the planet. And throughout the world and the different indigenous tribes, the story is the same about the white spirit animals. They're regarded as very sacred. and they only come to the planet when humans are in desperate need. So, I walked away from that experience a changed person completely. I mean, I just was not the same person in any way, shape, or form. It had changed my life so profoundly. And so the next year, I took a group of animal communicators from the US, and we went and spent 7 days just communing with them, connecting with them, as well as the land and the people, because it is this whole reconnection that really is, for me, the most important part. Is, humans are animals, and we've forgotten that. We've separated ourselves almost from nature. It's kind of us and them. We always refer to the animals as the animals and the humans as humans, but we're just another species.
Yes.
And we have forgotten that we're animals, and that our connection and way of balance and being with the planet is how we keep the harmony.
Yes.
However, as a species, because we have been so disconnected from nature, because of technology and all kinds of other influences, we are out of harmony. And if you remember the story about the wolves in the Yellowstone Park, that when all the wolves were killed off, mainly because they were attacking the farms around Yellowstone Park, and there were a lot of hunters that ended up killing off the natural predators in that area, the entire park completely changed its ecosystem.
Right.
And the rivers changed not direction, but they changed the way they flowed.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of soil erosion, because there were a lot of antelope eating grass, and there weren't enough predators to kill off the antelopes, and the antelope population grew. And anyway, the whole ecosystem was put out of balance. And within 1 year, when they reintegrated the wolves, understanding now that that was what was missing from the ecosystem, within 1 year, they saw a massive difference in the balancing of the ecosystem back to normal after they'd introduced the wolves.
Well, Tamar, what I'm feeling is like that's exactly what we have to do as people. We have got to get reconnected to what we've disconnected ourselves from in order to care. I mean,
Yes.
when I went to Peru, and we have events in Peru and in the jungle and around the sacred lands, and that's the biggest piece is really, I mean, whether you come to sightsee or whatever, it's that reconnection to nature. And oh my goodness, how did I lose this? How did I forget who I am? It's almost like we forgot who we are because we're so disconnected.
But it's the animal in us that we've forgotten. It's our instinctive nature we've forgotten. But isn't it interesting? Whenever anybody goes on holiday, they normally try to go into nature in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So it's intuitively and instinctively in us that need for reconnection in order to regenerate and relax. And so it is actually still there. It's just unconsciously not a priority.
Right.
And I think that that's more than anything what needs to change. And anybody who's going on this awakening journey and this shift in consciousness is feeling it. They're needing that time and space out. They're needing to go back into nature so that they can literally refuel themselves. They need to feel grounded in the ground. I have a massively natural connection with water. I have to be near water in any way, shape, or form. And I literally suffocate if I'm not. I get quite hysterical if I can't find a lake or a dam or something of water that I can actually get near to.
Yes. Because
it's the healing element, whereas nature, and science has been proving this for thousands of years actually, that nature is an extremely healing asset to us. We just don't understand how to tap back into that because we've lost that natural connection with the planet.
Yes.
So I agree with you 100%. The first step is to reconnect with that instinctive intuition in ourselves and go out into nature, even if it's in the garden, if it's on a walk, doesn't matter. Even in the smallest possible way, putting plants into your home, going out for walks in nature, taking your shoes off and standing on the grass and really feeling it and getting really grounded in it, or going to, when you go to the beach to, appreciate the sand, float in the water and feel the ocean. 85% of the planet is covered in water. We have to respect it more,
Yes.
It's this disrespect that is causing the massive problems that we're now seeing.
Well, I love what you said about the compassion. So when I went to the jungle the first time, that was my biggest thing. I had been in there for like a week. I was in this super connected space. We went for a hike to go where I actually telepathically called a macaw to me. But on the journey there, I reached out to this ancient tree. I mean, it was enormous. And I put my hand on the tree, and I, with all my heart, I apologized for what we're doing to the planet. And all I felt back was love. All I felt back was almost a pity, kind of compassion, like you just don't understand.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how all of nature feels about us. Like we're just really lost. And You're right. It's time to wake up. So you mentioned that all of these white species come back with a message when things get really intense. What is their message?
Well, first of all, of love and compassion and understanding that we as a young species, they refer to us as a young species, that we've lost our way and that we need their help in order to reconnect. Also that, it's really interesting because they all mention the same thing. So you don't need to do anything grand. You just need to do the little things. And it's to be more consciously aware of like what you're doing day to day, how you're running your homes. Are you thinking about it consciously, looking at the kind of waste that you have, just being more aware of our relationships with each other, being more compassionate towards each other as a species. Never mind, and it's really interesting. Yes, it's important for us to look after the animal species, but they've also a very strong message that we have to look after ourselves and our own species. I had a really profound download from one of the lions in one of the days that we went out. And it was really about, being in my own power and how I was not being compassionate with myself, never mind other people. And I got this very strong sense that until you learn to love yourself and love your own species, how can you expect to respect or love any other species?
Wow.
And it was very profound because there are a lot of us that are animal lovers that prefer animals to humans. Okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm one of those. And I got a really profound message around that wasn't right. That was like, how can you love any other species if you don't love your own species, and you can't love your own species if you don't love yourself? And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, that's big.
I have to, understand this compassion thing within myself and for my own species. And that's why you will never see me post up all the negative stuff that happens around animal abuse, because I know it's there. The media, and there's enough coverage of it elsewhere. I don't want that energy around me because it doesn't help me. It hurts me. So in order for me to try to do the best that I can, I am aware of it, but I don't focus on it. What I try to do is to share much more positive messages, because there are millions of people out there on an individual basis, just like you're doing with your show. I'm doing with my events. Somebody's doing with helping with cat sitting and house sitting and dog sitting. All of us are doing our little bit to try and help. And there are more millions of people doing that than there are of those that are not doing it or being destructive.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the big key for as far as the not focusing on the negative, because I'm totally about that too, I do like to share messages where we can learn the unintended consequences of our behaviors. And I was catching some of that on your website before this conversation, how some of the things that we're doing, like going to swim with the dolphins, we think that's a beautiful way to reconnect with nature, and we don't understand the impact of that on nature.
Absolutely. It's our need, funny enough, as humans, that need for touch. It's the same as petting the little cubs, or touching the tigers, or going to touch the elephants. All of that, we have this human need to touch. And it's not, it is our species need. And there are other species similar to ours, like the monkeys that need to touch. However, most other species don't need to touch. And therefore, we need to be respectful of that. The minute you humanize an animal, so like cub petting, they take the little baby cubs from the lions at such a young age, and then, you have photographs of people sitting there and petting them. Mm-hmm. People need to understand the consequence of doing that is that cub now becomes humanized. It's likely to end up on a farm, a lion farm, that those lions are then used for hunting packages that are sold to Americans who come out and hunt the lion for trophies. So that's where they end up, because once they're humanized, they're very difficult to reintegrate back into the wild.
And I don't think people know that. I think we need to know that, because we don't mean to do that. And even as simple as, feeding the squirrels at the park or whatever, we just don't understand what we're creating. But even if it's not to get them into captivity at some point, it's that there is developing a trust, and the next person that comes along may not have their best interest at heart. It may not be a cute little treat in their hand. So it really is for us to be conscious, to love them and respect them in the way that is best for them.
Absolutely. And that's the important thing, is to truly understand and respect wildlife, and to understand how it needs to be treated. But you look at how we consume our food. Okay, and of course, there's a massive growth in the vegan industry, and that's the awakening in consciousness that's creating that. There's no doubt about it. But I always say, but what about the plants? How are we treating the plants that we eat? Because we treat them in the same way, because we falsely generate them. We put them in environments. We do all kinds of things to our vegetable food too.
Right.
And they also have feelings. It may not be as profound as animals, but they do also have feelings, and science has proven that too.
Yes.
So even though, yes, it's absolutely necessary that the consumption of protein really needs to be reduced, I think, significantly, particularly because there's so much waste, but more so because of the brutality of what we do. And it's that lack of complete respect for other species on this planet that creates that. And it's our unawareness of what is actually happening. Because as we know, anybody who actually sees how our food ends up in the supermarkets is very unlikely to ever eat it again if they actually see the process of it.
Right.
Even in a humane environment, it's still very difficult to watch. This desensitization is pretty much what we've done as humans, because we're getting further and further and further away. Right. So we do have to create the awareness. I truly believe in that. But sometimes it goes overboard, when all those horrific pictures are put up. And I think that because there's enough exposure of that, what I try to do is to find the balance between the two, going, yes, we're aware, and people need to be aware that that's happening. So, for instance, what I was sharing with you before, in South Africa right now, there's been this sudden focus on lions for their bones. And this again has come out of China. Because, if it's not the elephant tusks now or the rhino horns, it's now become the bones of lions. Wow. And it's supposed to give them, a euphoric sense of courage or something ridiculous. And unfortunately, wherever there's money involved and poverty, like we have in South Africa, the government has now agreed to cull 1,500 lions specifically for the bone trade, which is horrendous, because what is happening is that they're kind of rubber stamping that it's okay to do that. And it's just diabolical. I mean, if you think, when I left South Africa about 18 years ago, 19 years ago, there were 250,000 lions in Africa. There are now 25,000 lions.
That's insane.
That's just in just over 15 years. We
Wow.
cannot afford to kill 1,500 lions to satisfy the Chinese need for something that is completely rubbish for the sake of money, which they say they're going to put back into conservation. That never happens, by the way.
Right.
And we just cannot afford to do that. And then we have the situation of, lion farmers who are saying, no, that we're breeding lions so that we make sure that we have them if they do go extinct. The problem with that is their genealogy. And there's a lot of bad genes, especially when they're interbreeding with the same members of families and so on. It is just, it's inconceivable that we think we can play God with this.
Right. Well, and now I understand why the Lions reached out to you, because it sounds like there's so much need for what you do, and unfortunately, we're running out of time. And I know there's so much more that you can say on behalf of so many animals on the planet. But I want to make sure we ask you what events you've got coming up that you'd like people to know about.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, I could go on for hours and hours. And all my friends go, you're so passionate about it. They leave the conversation going, goodness gracious, what am I going to be doing now going forward? But thank you for giving me the platform to at least share that a bit about it.
Well, thank
and
you.
Every year I get called to different animals, which is really interesting. So this year I'm actually being called for the African elephant, and that pretty much started middle of last year, where I started to get these visions about elephants. And so we organized a trip that's actually starting in about 3 weeks' time, which is going to Kenya, and it's in support of the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, which is an amazing organization that helps with orphan elephants and injured elephants throughout Kenya. But they have a wonderful orphanage in Nairobi itself, where you can actually adopt or support specific orphans. And so we've organized this trip in support of the charity. And it's a 10-day trip where we're going to visit the orphanage and have one-to-one time with the orphans that we've actually sponsored.
Aww.
We've adopted. So that will be really, really lovely for everybody. We're then going to travel through pretty much all of the big parks. So we're going to Savo, Voi, and at Voi they have the teenager facilities of the orphanage. So once they get to, I think it's about 10 or 11 years of age, they then get moved to Voi, the Voi facility, where the teenagers that were in the orphanage are then being reintegrated back into nature as much as possible. So we're going to be visiting them there. We're going to Lake Navasha, and we're going to Mboseli, which is where you see Kilimanjaro and the beautiful herds of elephants, up to the Masai Mara, where we're going to see the incredible mass migration of 2 million animals that go from Tanzania up to Kenya and back again. We'll be doing a hot air balloon ride over the Masai Mara. We'll be spending time with the incredible Masai tribe itself. We're going to find out a lot more about the challenges they are having as a tribe, how they've had to adapt to a new way of living. And they are amazing about how integrated with the land they are, the way that they manage their tribe and their traditions. That can teach us a lot of how to reconnect and how to live symbiotically with our environment.
Yes.
So yes, there are 6 wonderful ladies who are coming over. We're also going to be doing animal communication throughout the trip. So we're actually going to be hands-on experiencing that and communing with all the animals that we're going to be spending time with. So that's going to be very dynamic. And we're going to be raising funds for the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. So that starts on the 9th of September until the 18th of September. And then in 2019, we've got a trip to the White Lions from the 4th to the 11th of September in 2019.
And they can get all of this at myavataradventure.com, right?
Yes, the information is on there too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all that you're doing on behalf of all of the species, which ultimately are one with us. So ultimately, it is about our species. And I love how it comes back to that, how they're here to teach us. So one last quick parting thought after all that you've shared that you'd like to leave listeners with?
I think that, just, spend as much time in nature as you can. Make that effort to do that. Be in the present moment with it. If you have pets, be in the present moment with your pets. Be there, still yourself. If you've learned meditation, it's a great way of stilling yourself and stilling your thoughts, and then just opening your heart and connecting. And you can do it in the forests with the trees and the plants. You can do it with your pets and animals. You can do it at the beach. Just take that little time out every day to spend connecting to nature.
Great advice. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And thank you, listener, for taking the time to join us as well. I hope you've enjoyed all that we've shared here. Make sure to get on our mailing list so you'll hear about upcoming guests and events at journeyofpossibilities.com. And we'll see you next time on Exploring Possibilities.